It's wonderful to see we have folks dialing in from Africa today. I think I'm going to get started. So good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the third Digital Learning Series session of 2022. As you can see from the chat, we have participants registered from across Southeast Asia, but also from Europe, the US, Australia, and Africa, which goes to show the global relevance of our topic today. My name is Wei Li, and I lead Grow Asia's agri-food innovation and digital work. We are a multi-stakeholder platform catalyzed by the World Economic Forum and ASEAN Secretariat that builds partnerships for inclusive, resilient, and sustainable food systems in Southeast Asia. Through events like the one you're participating in today, Grow Asia has sought to bridge gaps and facilitate collaboration between the diverse private, public, and development sector stakeholders in our community. I want to thank our primary donor, Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, whose support makes events like these possible. Today, we're excited to be convening a panel about the current global crisis, which the FAO has called the 5F crisis, referring to food, feed, fuel, finance, and fertilizer. Today, we will be focusing especially on fertilizer and not just on the challenges that the current crisis poses to farmers globally, especially small-scale producers. We also want to highlight opportunities and potential solutions in the areas of precision agriculture and biostimulants that can help to decrease the carbon footprint of agriculture. You can see on your screen, this is our agenda for today. We will have two short presentations from startups AgroCares and Kelp Blue, followed by a moderated panel discussion with a lineup of speakers offering diverse perspectives on the current crisis. Without further ado, let me hand the floor over to our first presenter, Tanya Lubers, International Operations Manager for Development Project at AgroCares. Over to you, Tanya.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me, and let me represent AgroCares. We can already start with the first slide. I can't see it right now. Perfect, thank you very much. So yeah, hello again. And yeah, so my name is Tanya Lubers. I'm operations manager at AgroCares. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to introduce ourselves here. So AgroCares is a startup or a scale-up working with all sorts of sensor technology for soil and feed analysis mainly, and I will give you a short introduction of what we do, how we do it, and why we do what we do. Yeah, so probably a lot of you, for a lot of you, it's nothing new. We all knew food production has to increase. We're about to feed 10 billion people by 2050, so it's estimated we need to increase by 60%. At the same time, we're losing yields due to climate change, but also climate catastrophes. I think this year has been an exceptionally good example of all the things that impact yields and yield losses all over the world. And yeah, we're not only that, but also we're using fertile land, fertile arable land due to certain types of cultivation, desertification, multiple other reasons. It has been identified that only 5% of the 570 million farmers that we have at this moment have access to farm data, and with that I mean particularly soil information and fertility information. Next slide, please. So the challenges that AgroCares that we are trying to address is monitoring nutritional information, specifically soil nutrition information, in real time on a field level. We're trying to get rid of this obstacle that we currently have with traditional methods, where a farmer sends in their sample, has to wait for a long period of time, but usually they send in their samples at a very crucial moment in the season, where it is needed to get the analysis result as quickly as possible to adjust your inputs, for example, or your management in general. So we're providing not only analysis information, but also integrating right away fertilizer recommendations that are very localized for the farmer situation. So with all the field information that can be gathered from that particular farmer. At the same time, we're also working a lot in capacity development, awareness creation for soil fertility, nutrient cycling. Next slide, please. So the two different types of solutions that we developed is one that is called Lab in a Box. So it's essentially a laboratory based on two different types of sensors, a mid-infrared and an X-ray. It's called Lab in a Box because it fits in a very big box or into a truck. So it can be mobile or a stationary laboratory. It is different to the traditional lab chemistry because it doesn't use any solubles. It is a very easy to use tool, so it doesn't require a lot of training, and it's a very quick sample preparation as opposed to more traditional methods. The other solution that we have is a handheld scanner. It's a near-infrared tool that can just be taken into the field, and it analyzes soils instantly, but also feed or leaf materials. Next slide. So how does it all work or come together? So we have these different types of solutions, the handheld tool and also the Lab in a Box. It connects to a software that can be a web portal or an application on the phone. The farmer or the advisor punches in all the information from the field, and together with the analysis results of the sample, we create tailored recommendations for this particular situation of the farmer. In order to reduce inputs, but also to adjust to certain management practices. So it is very much customizable and tailored to a specific local situation. And as I mentioned before, so it's not only for soil, but it's also for feed and leaf materials. Next slide. To give you an impression where we're active at this moment, so for soil analysis, we are already operational in 35 countries. For feed analysis, already globally active. Tool that is being used in Southeast Asia in particular. We are active in Myanmar, in the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia, which is not mentioned here in that list. We're working with all different types of stakeholders. So it's really from government to input providers, advisory services, extension officers, but also very particular value chains such as coffee or cocoa, for example. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. That was the very quick introduction. I hope I made it with 5 minutes, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Tanya. And now I'd like to hand the floor over to Valentin Petiot, Head of Market Development at Kelp Blue, for our second presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Guraja, for this opportunity. I'm Valentin, the Head of Market Development of Kelp Blue, and I'm going to introduce you to Seaweed and Seaweed Biostimulant. Same problem if you can scroll up a bit. Perfect. Nice. Next slide, please. Perfect. Next slide. So first, the vision and the mission. So Kelp Blue, what we're doing is that we are cultivating offshore kelp forest to boost ocean health and sequester also vast amount of carbon forever. Globally, our headquarters is in the Netherlands. We have a pilot in Namibia now, but also a global development portfolio in Alaska, New Zealand, Chile, and so on. And what we're trying to do is with the seaweed to produce different products that can help the shift to sustainability. So for example, seaweed biostimulant for agriculture. Next slide, please. So the type of seaweed we are cultivating is macrocystis. So it's a bit like cultivating crops on land, but we do this on the sea. Macrocystis, just some key characteristics, is the tallest seaweed of the world. So it can grow up to 65 meters, but it's also the fastest growing organism on Earth. It grows faster than bamboo and works a bit like ecosystem engineer. Next slide, please. The reason why we are cultivating the seaweed is to sequester carbon. Like you can see here, giant kelp has the ability to sequester more carbon in terms of surface than any other kelp, but also the Amazon tropical rainforest. Of course, in terms of surface, and we're still looking at refining these numbers. The second reason why we are doing this is for biodiversity, because where you have kelp, you have life. It works a bit like a land forest, basically. Next slide, please. So to be able to do that, to create more hectares of farm, we need to, of course, also produce different products. So we have the kelp forestry, we have the harvesting with new efficient way, processing, and then we have the sales of different products, such as the biostimulant. We will probably discuss about this one, but we are also looking at other products such as alginate for biopackaging, but also textiles. Next slide, please. This is how we grow the seaweed. So we are offshore, 5 to 10 kilometers away from the coast. We don't need any fertilizers, any input at all, no pesticides, nothing. We just let grow the seaweed vertically until it will reach the top. Then it will grow horizontally. And what we're going to do is only harvest the top meter, so we can let the biomass in the water and still sequester carbon and boost biodiversity. Next slide, please. So this is the Cap Blue vision by 2050. We want to have 5+ locations, more than 1 million hectares of forest. So we try to think big as much as possible and sequester, of course, huge amount of carbon per year and creating jobs. Next slide, please. So then with the seaweed, we process them into a biostimulant, which is called Stim Plus. Next slide. The reason why biostimulant is so interesting is that you have the risk of hunger that is rising. You also have general consensus saying that synthesized fertilizer can cause environmental threats. Also, the European Commission, they want to replace 30% of chemical fertilizers with organic or bio-based products. And also, like you all know, the price have doubled in the past 6 months, but the Russian invasion of Ukraine could make it even worse. Next slide, please. So this is why biostimulant is so interesting, because they are a great tool to basically in the farmer's toolbox to mitigate climate change by still keeping the yield and reducing dependency on chemical fertilizers. Next slide, please. So I will go really quickly on that. What we're trying to do is a bit to restore the balance between the ocean and the land, so avoiding runoff and bringing back nutrient from the sea on the land. Next slide, please. So this is some results from UPL on wheat. So you can see the control in dark blue, and then 2 different concentrations of our products on SPAD value, fresh matter, but also dry matter. So the results were really encouraging. So we decided to test on other crops. So if you go to the next slide, you can see the results on mung bean, and you can see basically the root elongation thanks to the seaweed components such as the fucoidan, but also the polyphenols and a synergy of various components that can up or down regulate some genes inside the plant to help nutrients uptake with basically root elongation. Slide, please. And that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this quick presentation and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Valentin. Now let's move to the panel discussion. I hope all of you are ready to interact with the speakers. I already see some great questions coming in through the Q&A box, so please continue. In addition to Valentin and Tanya, who are coming back on for the panel, we will be joined by Werner Prinsloo, Director of Food and Sustainability at Yara International, and Dr. Nguyen Hu Nguyen, Vice Dean, Faculty of Economics and Rural Development at the Vietnam National University of Agriculture, as well as representative of the Vietnam Partnership for the Development of Human Resources in Rural Areas, also known as VietDRA. Our moderator, David Shearer, is the Managing Director of the Aggravation Effect, a startup service provider. Let me hand over the floor to David and to our wonderful panel.
Excellent. Thanks, Wei Li. Hello, everyone, and welcome wherever you are in the world and whatever time it is for you in the world. So for me, currently in Auckland, New Zealand, so a little after 10 p.m, but I'm really interested and really looking forward to this conversation, because it could not be more timely and a more important session in Grow Asia's digital learning series, with this focus on the global fertilizer crisis. But not only a focus on that area, but much more importantly, I think for all of us, is how we look at solutions in that space, and particularly innovative solutions, which we're starting to get some insights from both Tanya and Valentin in their introductory presentations. As Wei Li said, my name's David Shearer, and I run a very small consultancy called The Aggravation Effect, where we're really passionate about building capacity that has sustainable impact through scaling innovation. So just to carry on from Lee, just to remind you about the Q&A box, and we want this to be a discussion, a conversation with you. So please put your questions in the Q&A. We'll try at times to answer them live, or we might write a response to those, and there could be some follow-up as well. So I really encourage you to use the Q&A to be able to interact with the panel today. But first, to get that interaction going, I've got a couple more poll questions for you. And so I want to ask those to you. Now, what we're hoping is just for a quick response. It's just giving us a little bit of insight in terms of some of your feelings, expectations, and expertise to give us some insights. So if we can have the first question launch, please, the guys from Padang in the poll. Please. Great. So just a quick response. How long do you think fertilizer prices will remain high? Just a single response, less than 12 months, 1 to 5 years, or more than 5 years? So please just jot down your response. I'll give you a couple of seconds just to think it through, and then we're going to move on. All right, thanks, Padang. Let's move on to the next question. So the next question, question 2 in the poll. So if Padang can bring that up, that'd be great. And so in this one, we're just looking for your top 2 choices. So what of the below will be most affected by high fertilizer prices? Is it smallholder farmer livelihoods, consumer food prices, global fertilizer agribusinesses, national and local retailers, or government budgets? What are the top 2 effects of this high fertilizer price? I'll just give you a couple of seconds to respond to that. So let's close that one off if we could, Padang, just response. And now let's bring up the third and final one. So not too much more until we hear from the panel. So if we can bring up the third and final query. So again, just pick your top 2. And this one's about what actions are going to that will likely lead to lowering fertilizer prices. An end of the conflict, looking at alternative energy supplies, lower cost production methodologies, government subsidies, or in fact systems, food systems being less reliant upon manufactured inputs. So just if you can think about those and what are the top 2 that are likely to lower fertilizer prices over a longer period of time. And so just a couple of seconds for you to respond to those. And we really appreciate you taking the time to respond. So thanks, Padang. Look forward to seeing some of those results. I don't know if you'll be able to bring them up now or later in the conversation so we can show people. But why don't we kick into the panel if we could? Oh, there we go. So most people are looking at around that 1 to 5 years in terms of the fertilizer prices. That was good. So the majority of people looking at a sort of a medium-term implication. So if the results of the second poll can come up, please. I'm not sure if we can get those results of the second poll. There we go. So we're really, the majority of people are looking at that livelihoods of smallholder farmers are going to be influenced by high fertilizer prices. Thanks for that. That's really good insight. And also consumer prices in Asia. So there we having those impacts. And if we can get the results of the third poll too, please. Coming up, that'd be great. Excellent. So a little bit of more across the board in terms of the implications, but interesting to see probably a lower effect of government subsidies there. So really insightful, and thanks so much. You know, we're looking at medium term, 1 to 5 years. We're looking at an implication on smallholder livelihoods and food prices in Asia. And then we're looking at a broad range of things that are going to look at resolving some of this conflict and the high fertilizer price. So let's get into the panel. We're going to go to a little after the top of the hour, so a little bit over the top of the hour, so we have plenty of time for conversation. And so we're really looking forward to this. So you've met the first 2 panelists, but just to introduce them again, Tanya Lubers, who's the International Operations Manager, particularly focused on development projects for AgroCares, and we're looking forward to picking up the conversation from Tanya's presentation. And Valentine Pitio, who's actually in Auckland with me at the moment at a fantastic conference, Valentine's the head of market development for Kelp Blue. The other two panelists that I'm pleased to be joined with today is Werner Pinseloo. So Werner's the Director of Sustainability and Food Chain for Africa and Asia for Yara International, one of the significant global agribusinesses in the fertilizer space. And I'm also pleased to be joined by an old colleague of mine who I'm really pleased to reconnect with, Dr. Nguyen. And as Weili introduced, Dr. Nguyen plays both a role within Vietnam National University of Agriculture and also for Vietnam Partnership for Development of Human Resources in Rural Areas. So the aim of today's panel is to have a conversation with you and for you. And so not only we're going to look at the implications and impact of fertilizer prices, but perhaps more importantly, we're going to look at solutions in this space. And I guess you're starting to get some insight from the first two presentations as well. Because it's those insights around solutions that are going to be really important for our future food systems. And the way I want to structure it, or the way we hope to structure the panel sessions, is just to start with two rounds. Firstly, looking at what's the current situation, and then perhaps looking quite positively at the future. So let's get underway. Werner, I want to start with you from Yara's perspective. So we're hearing that, the current supply and demand dynamics in the global fertilizer sector are being affected by many factors, pandemic recovery, geopolitical tensions, conflict, energy prices, etc. So what's Yara's view about some of these key factors, and how is this influencing fertilizer utilization, particularly in Asia? Werner, over to you.
Hi, David, and good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to everyone. Real pleasure to be online today. So yes, from a Yara point of view, and how it affects the farmers, of course, the smaller farmers are affected the most, as indicated by the poll. Smallholders are really struggling to cope with these excessive fertilizer pricing at the moment. Larger farmers are increasingly using technology to cut down and be more accurate with the application of fertilizers, the utilization of precision agriculture technology. All of these items have an effect. But of course, smallholders does not necessarily have those technologies, and it affects them a lot more. So most smallholders take the decision either to buy less and apply less, or even not apply at all. So all of that, of course, have an impact on yields, on quality, and a whole range of other items that impacts the whole food value chain. So quite interesting things that's happening, very concerning to us as Yara, in a sense that it will affect food security in lots of places across the globe, as indicated and as flagged by Yara and our CEO on many occasions on public platforms. So it's a real concern to us as well. It goes without saying that it's a real concern.
Yeah, absolutely a concern, Werner, and I guess everyone joining us here today, shares some of those concerns. And as we move into the second round, I really look forward to Yara's experience and sharing some of the things that we look forward to in terms of that future setting for global food systems. So Tanya, let me pick up on your excellent presentation. And I guess we all know that digital tools are becoming much more accessible and really enabling farmers to make better decisions. But I was interested in your presentation to pick up that really only 5% of farmers have access to data, and it's that access that's really critical. So can you describe what you perceive of some of the challenges of getting these really important new digital tools, whether it's lab in a box, the handheld scanner, or others, into the hands of smallholder farmers for better decision making?
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed, and it's correct. I mean, the tools are all out there, well, we're just one of the providers, but I think costs, and I saw it popping up now in the questions as well. So what are the costs, and how can especially for smaller farmers, afford such technology? And the costs are still of course, a big factor, the challenges that we're trying to tackle. And even though these are already extremely affordable solutions compared to from a few years back, for smallholder farmers, especially in times of a crisis where you have to decide if you even purchase inputs for your fields, you don't necessarily go and invest in technology, especially not if it doesn't immediately show results on your field level, right? As farming is always, everything is a bit long term. It's not in the first season you will see results because you analyzed your soil one time and then adjusted your inputs based on this. So everything is a bit more long-term situation. And also with all of these tools, speaking not only from our perspective, I think it's just the digital infrastructure that's also in often cases still lacking, especially in very remote areas. So we all do need some kind of network and or advisors or farmers being able to use a smartphone phone perhaps. There are ways of working around it, but of course this is an enabler to make the transition and the adoption much faster. And it's still a lag at this moment, not necessarily only for smaller farmers. I don't want to point into different directions, but also within Europe, even we struggle with this digital infrastructure still a lot. Yeah, and also farming in general is still it's a conservative sector. We have aging farmers, so we have this generation divide in farming at this moment. So innovative tools are not necessarily, accepted everywhere or viewed very skeptical at this moment. So these are all things we're working on, and it's just a long adoption process and creation of awareness where we're trying to overcome these challenges.
Yeah, let me just continue on with that a little bit, Tanya. So it's a challenge, okay, and we know that it takes a long time for this quite traditional sector, although it's changing, this quite traditional sector to adopt technologies. You know, I wonder what are some of the ways that we can look to increase the rate of adoption? So it's not necessarily linear, so we can break down some of those barriers and really lead to faster adoption of these important technologies and innovations.
Is that directly at me again? Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah. Well, to fasten it is, for one, I think, is taking away a bit of the responsibility and burden from the farmers themselves. They're providing food for all of us, but yet they're left alone with all the risks and the changes of climate, and we want them to change to more regenerative agriculture, sustainable practices, apply innovative tools, but yet not necessarily no one, but there's a lack of support. Also from the financial side. So I think it's the responsibility of the entire value chain and the stakeholders to take part of the responsibility to mitigate the risk for the farmers themselves, to speed up this process. And farming is also such a local situation, right? So so it's a local environment. So we just have to put a lot of effort into the awareness creation and capacity building on a local level.
Yeah, I really like that. And there's always that challenge between this big, the global food system that we operate in, but the critical importance of context, and the context really driving innovation adoption in many areas. So thanks for that insight, Tanya. Valentin, I'm going to bring you in. It was really interesting to listen to your presentation, and because what I was thinking about there is the rising interest that we're seeing globally in the blue economy. And I think there's an important connection between the blue economy and the green land-based agricultural systems. And you made the reference to that connection in terms of restoring the balance. And so can we hear a little bit more from you about the role of the green economy, the role of seaweed as a contributor to more sustainable land-based agricultural systems, particularly as we think about these, these approaches like regenerative agriculture, agroecology, organic agriculture, etc. Make that connection for us between the blue economy and the green economy.
Sure, David. Thanks. So There is, yes, a growing interest from many actors, including multinationals who have, big commitments regarding their carbon emission across their value chain, such as PepsiCo, Nestle, Ben & Jerry, and so on. And what is interesting is if we take the carbon emission of packet of potato chips, the majority is not linked to the plastic of the packets, but to the synthesized fertilizers used to grow the potatoes. So that's quite interesting. And now how linking the blue and the green economy can help on that. So what is really interesting when you combine the blue and the green economy is that you have an impact on the ocean with carbon sequestration and biodiversity, like I briefly explained, but also on land with the biostimulant, on soil carbon sequestration and biodiversity for the microbiome. So you contribute basically to Regen Ag. But if you look at the global picture, so the global ecosystem C plus the land, in terms of regen, you can restore a certain balance, like you mentioned, David. So there are now many studies that are proven that seaweed biostimulant can reduce the use of fertilizers by allowing a better nutrient uptake, which leads to basically at the end reduce the runoff of nitrogen or even phosphorus, which usually ends up in the sea, and then it creates, in the sea, algae bloom or acidification of the oceans. So basically, by collecting a part of the seaweed like we do and turning them into biostimulants, not only do we bring nutrients from the ocean back to the land, but we also reduce the runoff of the fertilizer. So we kind of restore a certain balance in a way while contributing to Regen Ag. And I would also just like to add that today, like Tanya well explained, farmers, they are under pressure to guarantee food security, basically. And they have to maintain yields with fertilizers that have doubled in price due to the price of energy, but also the invasion of Ukraine, while in the meantime facing climatic stress such as drought, heat, flood. And I think that seaweed biostimulant can be one of the solutions basically in the toolbox, which allows to reduce the use of fertilizer, like I quickly explained, but also to better resist on different stresses and globally to contribute to Regen Ag that is accessible, affordable to farmers.
Yeah, really important point, Valentine, that you make there in terms of the critical nature of making this innovation accessible to farmers, affordable to farmers, and to be able to be utilised in the various range of contexts that farmers operate in. So critically important. So Dr. Nguyen, so good to see you again. We often have these conversations, and it's really critically important that we continue to focus on the role of the smallholder. And the smallholder farmer is key to global food security, and particularly their productivity, and more importantly, their role as stewards of the land. And so they're operating within these planetary boundaries. So can you give us some insight from Vietnam in terms of how these recent fertilizer prices that we've been discussing today, how they've affected farmers in Vietnam, the use of fertilizer, and what are you seeing as the potential implications for food security, not only in Vietnam, but globally as well? Dr. Nguyen, over to you.
Yes, thank you, David, for a very interesting question. And I would like to share with you. Yeah, for smallholder in Vietnam, I think also in similar in other developing countries. So they face a problem when the price of the fertilizer increase. In Vietnam, the smallholder for production, so the fertilizer cost about 40% of the production costs. So when the price increase, for example, this year, the price of fertilizer increase is the highest, they said that is the highest price over the 50 years. So it becomes very difficult for the farmer, especially small farmer, when they depend much on the agriculture input, especially who live with a small farm and who live in the remote and in the mountainous and the disadvantaged region. And it affects not only the smallholder, but also the other. But I think the smallholder, they affect more because they don't have enough input and don't have money to buy the fertilizer. and the price increase sometimes 30 to 40 or even 50% in comparison with the past period. So it's very high, and the farmer cannot afford to do that. And why the price of the agriculture product stays very stable, and sometimes it go down. Yeah, so the fertilizer price increase. Why the agriculture input price decrease? It because of the surplus due to the COVID-19, and also due to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and also many other issues around the world. So I think that the farmer is the one who affected much, and not only affected the Vietnamese farmer, but also affected the world, because Vietnam is the agriculture export country. So every year we export about 6 to 7 million tons of foodstuff to the world, and even this year they expect that we export about 6 to 7. And when the agriculture input, especially the fertilizer increase, the cost increase. So some farmers, many farmers, they don't want to continue agriculture because they may suffer from losses. And so Vietnam government also, for Vietnam, we have to import the fertilizer also. So for every year, the country use about 10 million tons of the chemical fertilizer, and we can produce about 85%, and about, if we don't import anything, so we can only produce 85% and 15% import from the world. So when the price increase, so it affect much in agriculture industry. So the question that is, so how can we deal with this situation? Of course, when the price go down, you cannot use less fertilizer. And so how can the farmer survive? So I think that is, we may not be, may be difficult for us to find the way to reduce the price, because you evaluate 5 years, but maybe more than 5 years, because we don't know what happened to the world and the world market in maybe 10 years or maybe 7 years. So so we have to find something is the urgent solution. So in my opinion, so let's try to provide the farmer with affordable techniques, so they can move to the more organic production-based system, and they can utilize the material from their own farm and to produce the organics and more organic, to produce in more organic way. And from the presentation of Tanzania, I think that's really good. The technology, the digital technology, also very good for farmer. But how can we produce the technology that the farmer is affordable to buy, and the capacity is can be good to apply. So there's another story. So the technology and another way that is we can think how to provide more support policy from the government and from the company, and so to help the farmer. And I think with the trend now, so the digital application of the technology is really good, especially the sensor technology, and it can help the farmer to determine the appropriate amount of fertilizer that the soil needed. And of course, it can help to reduce the fertilizer. Sometimes even now, even the farmer use over the amount of the fertilizer that not necessary for production. And okay, so I think is have some comment. I can come back again.
Thanks, Dr. Nguyen. That was excellent, and also provided an answer to one of the questions in the text in the Q&A session around, you know, what can be done about accessibility and affordability. And as you were sort of outlining towards the end there, you know, it's about looking at alternatives, it's about looking at tools for efficient use, it's about looking at policy support, etc. So it's really about bringing that innovation ecosystem to bear, so smallholders do have accessibility to, you know, more affordable options, inputs, and some of these options have been put on the table here. So it's great to be involved in this discussion. So Werner, I want to turn back to you. So what we're hearing, it's a pretty compelling story around the transformation that's required for the agri-food system. So give us some insight from Yarra's perspective in terms of some of that more strategic outlook that they have, whether that be around, decarbonisation, regenerative agriculture, green innovations. And I want to pick up one of the specific questions in the Q&A from Rob, just to talk a little bit more about the Green Fertilizer Initiative. So as we turn our mind to the future and solutions, Werner, can you set us off in that path and give us some insights in terms of what Yarra's doing in this space? Over to you.
Absolutely, David. Thank you. Yes. So as a large player globally, of course, Yarra is investing a lot into new technology, especially in decarbonization technology. Of course, our factories were fitted with carbon abatement technology many years ago, and we've also openly shared that technology with other players in the industry to help the industry decarbonize. But that's only one part of it. As we know, technology change and technology has enabled us to also look at new things. So one of the things that we are looking at now and that we are embarking on by mid next year is the manufacturing of green fertilizer. So you'll ask yourself, what exactly does green fertilizer mean? So green fertilizer is effectively creating chemical fertilizer with the process of electrolysis, where we essentially create a chemical fertilizer that's fossil free and is 90% less in carbon than any grey fertilizer that you find on the market today. So that is a massive step towards decarbonization. You can just imagine food, any type of food that will be fertilized with this green fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, will be 90% less in carbon, which is a massive leap forward. Then in addition to that, we're also embarking with a very rigorous regenerative agriculture strategy globally. We also tailor-made it in market in line with our in-country capabilities and capacities, and also utilizing our knowledge in country about soil. So for us, it's all about soil health. How do we assist farmers in reducing carbon and really improving their soil health with the products that we have and the new products that we're bringing on board? We are looking at organo mineral fertilizers. We have a large range of foliar fertilizers as well as biostimulants that all makes part of this nutrient use efficiency journey that we're on and focusing on, improving yield and improving quality and making sure that we have the best possible nutrient and water use efficiency that we can possibly achieve, making use of our agronomists in field. So as a company that's more than 115 years old, we've accumulated a massive amount of knowledge about crop nutrition, and we're really leveraging that with technologies that we deploy. So as part of the decarbonization journey, we of course create a lot of technology, both for small and for large farmers, that they can deploy in the form of precision agriculture technology, but also in very basic nascent technologies like feature phone technologies, even by sending SMSs on when farmers need to apply, for instance, top dressing fertilizers, when they need to apply foliar feed or any of those items. We also have a strategy of focusing on fertigation technologies and working really closely with the fertigation industry in general, partnering up with many stakeholders in the industry to enable farmers making use of fertigation technology to really be as productive as they can possibly be by putting extremely good quality products on the table, which is again linked to water use efficiency and nutrient use efficiency. So I hope that captures it for you, David.
Yeah, excellent, Bernard. Can I perhaps pick up one of the questions that is proposed in the Q&A box? In part, Lara asks, and I'm curious about this, what are the considerations from Yara about mandatory reporting of Scope 3 emissions? So Scope 3 emissions are those that are upstream and downstream from the actual enterprise. So is this mandatory reporting or potential mandatory reporting, you know, on the agenda of Yara and looking at addressing that?
Absolutely. That's how can I say, an area where we can play an active role. We are in discussion with many large food chain businesses globally, specifically on Scope 3 emissions and how we can assist them in reducing that. So that is really top of mind, and we are deploying strategies and projects and products even to specifically address those types of things. So I invite anyone to reach out to me directly for further discussion on that. But yeah, to answer, definitely yes.
Yeah, excellent. And look, if this dialogue, if this conversation can stimulate some ongoing engagement, of course, we're all particularly pleased to engage in that. Tanya, I want to bring you back in and I guess pick up in part some of where you were ending up in your last contribution to the panel, because the more and more we hear about it, the more and more we hear about the importance of collaboration and partnership. And I think particularly in, you know, this digital space where we're, you know, there've got to be partners, there's got to be collaboration from outside the sort of traditional set that sits within agriculture. So can you tell us a little bit about your views about how stakeholders can come together, particularly to support the digital revolution? And this digital revolution, you know, everyone in the panel is talking about it as a key part of the solution. So how do we bring the right stakeholders together to collaborate effectively?
Yeah, I think, I mean, Werner already mentioned a bit through carbon. We've seen it in the last years, has been a massive driver. Of course, we all have this carbon tunnel vision now. I mean, there's also other important aspects to it, but carbon has been a great promoter of regenerative agriculture practices, for example, reducing inputs and just trying to think a bit outside of the box, trying to apply more innovative tools, digital tools, making use of all the data that we already have. And so that's also how we are working. And we've seen it in just an example from our side, what we've seen and what we've been working with a lot lately is, for example, the coffee sector. So the coffee sector happens to be under a lot of stress already due to loss of varieties and because they're so, altitude is so important and they're just losing a lot of suitable land at this moment. But they also committed a lot to changing their practices and reducing carbon footprint and have really strict commitments there. So they're imposing this on the entire value chain, essentially, to make the change and digitalize everything, collect this data, make use of this data, and essentially brought together all the stakeholders within this value chain to work on this and support the farmers on the farm level themselves. So there we could see really how impactful that has been and how easy it is to roll out if you have some strong stakeholders in the value chains that are starting this shift, but also with governments. For example, we're working a lot with governments. There have been a few governments, for example, in Tanzania, we're having a big project at this moment where they decided, okay, we need to learn more about our soils, we need to map soils, we need to work on soil fertility, and yeah, have been rolling it out over the entire country. So yeah, all of these are initiatives that we are actively working in at this moment, and trying to create awareness.
Yeah, that's great, and I think that gives some insight. I see that Hujan Yao has asked a question around what are the challenges that, you know, for agri-tech startups, which you are, Tanya, really face in terms of introducing new technologies to farmers. And I think when you think about that sort of diverse ecosystem that you work in and the need to pull together collaboration and partnership to achieve that successfully, I think that's really insightful. So thanks very much, Tanya. So Valentine, just to bring you back in, you talked a little bit about and gave us some good examples about this integration with blue and green, and I think that's a really exciting space for the future of our agri-food systems. So, but I'm curious about what many of us describe as the enabling environment, you know, the financing, whether that be private or public, the policy setting environment. So, and what's your view around how we can get this enabling environment right to reach the potential of that blue-green integration and the utilisation of these innovations that you've been putting on the table? Valentine, over to you.
Yeah, sure, David, thanks. So today the statistics show that it's very difficult to raise funds in the blue economy, first of all, although seaweed is trending right now. So as far as politics are concerned, they have been really supportive to us in Namibia, but also everywhere we are. And yeah, they're really supportive to help us create the farms, bring the product into the market, etc. The challenge now is to produce a product that is affordable for farmers and contributes to Regen Ag at scale. This is really important. And few businesses are able to produce this at scale, mainly because of the capital required to grow the seaweed, but also the numerous tests of biostimulants, the regulation to follow in different countries. So every regulation is more or less different for each country, and so on. So I think we need to encourage investors to invest in the blue economy, which represents more or less 70% of planet Earth, and especially in sustainable and beneficial projects in the blue economy from a social, but also from an environmental point of view. And then I think collaboration is key. So the big company like Nestle, PepsiCo, etc., that have big commitment in Regen Ag, they need to partner with the startups, but also the company that can produce something. They also need to partner with the different stakeholders, so directly the farmers, to understand what is their problem or what are their problems. And in the meantime, if we can sit together also with the main actors of the industry, such as the governments, in terms of regulation, etc., then I think we can leverage this link between the blue and the green economy. And then I also had a really great question in the chat. So I'm sorry, I'm just answering another question right now.
Please do.
About the toxicology of the seaweed biostimulant. So it was in the Q&A. And the advantage of our seaweed biostimulant, but mainly all seaweed biostimulants, is that it's an organic product. So not only it's not harmful for the environment, but it also stimulates the biodiversity. And as far as humans are concerned, the product is completely safe to use. So I have here, I don't know if you can really see it, but I have a little sample. So I'm gonna, of course, we never make claim without test. So we can drink the product. It's safe to drink, it's safe to use. So of course, don't drink it. That's not the best, but you can apply it safely on your crops. Thank you.
Well, that's a pretty fantastic demonstration of innovation and the utilization of innovation, Valentine. So thanks very much for that. So Dr. Nguyen, I want to turn to you again. And I really want to, I'm sort of quite curious about this policy space in Vietnam. You know, one of the keys of addressing, you know, when the food price spike in 2007, 2008 was appropriate policy responses. And in some areas, we continue to get that policy pretty right. And in other areas, we're still pretty challenged. You know, we've seen in this fertilizer price crisis, some restrictions on trade, which are likely to have a negative knock-on effect in terms of fertilizer pricing. So can you tell us a little bit about you know, how the Vietnamese government may be thinking in relationship to policies in this area, that would enable smallholders, to continue to derive livelihoods. And we saw from the poll that that's where the greatest level of impact is going to be. So how can smallholders continue to derive livelihoods, be productive, but in the face of these rising risks, rising input costs? So Dr. Nguyen, over to you.
Okay, thank you, David. So for to dealing with the problem, so the Vietnamese government, so especially the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, so they propose the policy to reduce the tax for fertilizer import, and beside us, the government, Vietnamese government, they pay very much attention to the digital transformation in agriculture. And it's the first time in the history, and they take the 10th of October, yesterday, is the day for the digital transformation. So the government made effort to transfer or to apply the digital transformation in agriculture. I think it's one of the objective is to improve the technique, production technique, and the practice for the farmer. So to change from the conventional agriculture production to more digital-based agriculture production with the new technology like Tanza and some other mentioned earlier. But now what I think what we need to pay attention is how to produce and how to provide the technology that the farmer can access. They can afford to buy, they can afford to apply, because the Vietnamese farmer, and also I think many smallholder in the Southeast Asia country, very small farmer with small farm, they don't have the big farm, so they don't have money to invest, and even if they can get the loan to invest, it's not efficient. So I think it's really important to diversify the policy. So something that I mentioned earlier. So the first thing should be on the focus more on to transform the agriculture to more organic oriented farming system, and also something with the circular production system. So try to utilize the available material and input, and so to help the small farmer. And very important that is in order to help the farmer to deal with the price of the fertilizer. So not only help the farmer to change the practice, but also help them to use the fertilizer appropriately. And I think the affordable and appropriate technology, like the sensor technology, to help the farmer with the basic techniques. They can know the need for the fertilizer from the soil, and when it's in need, and how should be the situation for them to use the fertilizer. And of course, in parallel with that, so we need to develop the infrastructure for internet, because it's like the northwest of Vietnam and many other mountainous area in Southeast countries, the farmer have limited access to the internet. So even they have the good technology, but the infrastructure is not adequate for farmer to apply and to transform. So it impossible. So it is, and I think the price of the fertilizer will increase, and it continue increase. And I think 10 years ago, when David worked in the northwest of Vietnam, so all the northwest area, including Sơn La province, so the corn production is the majority, but now it's no more corn. And the main reason is the price of the fertilizer increased and the price of corn decreased. And so now they transfer to more food farming system. So I think we cannot design the recipe for the farmer to deal with the problem. But in my opinion, so I think that is the most important is to build the capacity for the farmer to determine what techniques they apply and how digital technologies they should apply or not, and at what scale. And there also the alternative way in the choosing the application of the new technology, or go back to the more organic way. So, and they also depend on the resources of the farm, of the community, and also of the region. And so it needs to, however, it needs to support from the government, from the development agency in terms of the capacity building, because the farmers themselves, they cannot change themselves. And we can make the good advantages of the farmer. That is the Vietnamese farmer. The majority of Vietnamese farmers, they have a smartphone, but the smartphone now is only for Facebook and for some social network, not for the agri-business. So if we can develop more agriculture apps that can help the farmer to link to the market and to get information from the fertilizer input, and also to link with some other government investment for the technology to measure the problem of the soil or the environment, so they can adjust the use of the fertilizer, and they have to minimize the cost and to avoid what I call the nutrient pollution.
Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Mang. Yeah, really excellent insight, and real insight in terms of the role of the Vietnamese government and the centrality of the smallholder as we think about innovation and scaling those innovations and the support that's needed within that ecosystem. So we're drawing the panel to a close. I'm going to put the panelists on the spot by asking them, what's the one key takeaway for the audience from their perspective, particularly around this the global fertilizer price. So a very quick insight from each of the panelists. I just want to acknowledge everyone's really active participation. I'm really sorry that we haven't been able to get to all the questions that are being posed. I really thank the panelists for answering some of the questions, typing it through whilst we've been going. And I have tried to integrate some of the questions into the discussion that we've had. So thanks very much for everyone's active participation. As Verna said, we're all pleased to be able to get in contact and to discuss some of the more specific questions you had in relationship to this discussion. So, but as we close, let's quickly go around the room, the panelists, just for the one key takeaway. So in my usual order, so Verna, why don't I start with you? What's the one key takeaway you'd like the audience to take with them after today's session?
Yes, thank you, David. I think fertilizer pricing, unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball to give us any insights into that, but I do believe for the short term, as we've seen in the poll, prices will most probably stay high for all the obvious reasons we see today. I think regenerative agriculture is something that is top of mind at the moment. Everyone acknowledges that, and Yara is really committed in that sense to engage with companies, with farmers, and really make it work. We are well equipped to do that, and definitely something that we are believing in.
Great. Excellent to hear that commitment from Yara. Tanya, what's your one takeaway?
Yeah, tricky. So many good things have been mentioned, but I think mainly it's still the struggle for the smallholders and how to best support smallholders, just to see the responsibility of the stakeholders, if it's policymakers or other actors in the value chain, to support and mitigate the risk that smallholders have at this point, and to help them in the transition to regenerative agriculture and more digital options.
Excellent. So we've got that commitment, and then we've got the responsibility to smallholders. Excellent. Valentine, add to that. What's your one key takeaway or one key message for the session?
Yeah, I think to address food security, there is a need to move into something more sustainable, maybe Regen Ag or something similar. And of course, to make products affordable to farmers and to help them to basically to do the transition to sustainable agriculture, because it's easy to say, yes, you have to do Regen Ag, but they also need help to slowly do this big transition. Yep. So this is, I think, my takeaway.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely that support needed in that transformative approach. And Dr. Nguyen, lastly to you, your one key message or one key takeaway.
Yes, the key message I want to share that is if we want to have the farmer, the smallholder, so we must put them in the central. So the first thing we need to do that is to help them to build the capacity, technical capacity, market capacity, and also the digital capacity. And when they have the capacity enough, so they can have the right choice for their fertilizer, for their investment, and for their product, agriculture production business, and also for their market asset. And their right decision is better than any support from others. Yeah. So that's the key message.
Excellent. Yeah, really like that centrality of the smallholder, really important. So look, on behalf of all participants in today's session, I'd like to pass on my thanks to the panelists. Fantastic to get your insights, fantastic to get your expertise, and in some ways quite stimulating, you know, to hear these different views around in face of crisis, but really what we can do in the face of that crisis. So thanks everyone for participating. And Adam, over to you.
Thank you very much, David, for masterful facilitation moderation this afternoon. But a big thanks to Tanya and Valentine for your presentations, to Werner and Dr. Nguyen for your participation as well. I think what's kind of interesting today for me is I'm certainly actually very focused on the blue economy. And this is the first time I've heard blue economy being matched in this way during the digital learning series. And we constantly are talking about systemic approaches, and we've been talking systemically on land. I think now when we start to expand, as we know that the oceans are so fundamental to everything we do on the land and vice versa, the way that one populates the other. And I don't think there's enough focus on that. So Valentina, I think it's great to hear your thoughts on that and the way that we're supporting the oceans, produce from the ocean to be supporting the land. And we know we're all looking for that kind of circular. So I think that's a really fantastic way to see it in that overall picture. And Tanya, your particular offering solutions, the way that you can bring it back to the soil, because unless we understand what we're dealing with, then we can be over applying, under applying, applying the wrong. And then Dr. Nguyen, I think as always, it does, of course, as you rightly say, it's got to come back to the farmer. It's about building capacity, putting them at the center of all our solutions, not having solutions first. And you know, you made it very real for the problems that the farmers in Vietnam are facing, what the price spike is doing for them. And unlike many other people, when faced with problems, they don't have that many options. So we need to look at new tools. And I think, Werner, what Yara is doing with, you know, the promise of green fertilizer, you know, 90% reductions, amazing opportunities through that, and obviously your overall activities and decarbonisation. So what I really liked is the way the sort of the big picture, balancing the blue and green economies, how, of course, they're circular and support one another, understanding the soil, the microbiome, how we are understanding the health of the soil, how we're improving it, how we're changing what we're fertilizing with at the moment as we go forward. So a really rich conversation. So, you know, thank you all very much. And, you know, Padang, having been involved with this over the last 4 years, just continues to enjoy being associated in this way and to see what's coming out. Now, two more things. We've got the last digital learning series for the year coming up. Most probably we'll try to squeeze it into November or maybe very early December. We're not quite sure what it's going to be. We'll see. We might even go with a face-to-face. Who knows? It would be nice to get to see some of our friends here in Singapore. But of course, as we saw at the beginning of the call, so many of you are outside and around the world. So we need to balance the interests of all. So stay tuned, and you'll get a follow-up email from today with the link to the recording, and of course we'll make you aware of what the next edition of the digital learning series is. So thanks to Wei Lee and all the team at Grow Asia. Thank to Team Padang and all the folks for putting this together. But one last thing before we go, we'd like to have the final poll, if you will. And we'd like, if you could launch that, please, Dawn, that'd be great. So please, how useful was the webinar for you? And I'll just keep talking till I think most of you have get it. I can't see the actual numbers, but please fill that in. And also, it's not just the poll on this. Please contact us with if your questions weren't answered, if you'd like more information about anything that was presented here today, please contact us. The contact details will come up shortly, and we look forward to being in touch with you. And we look forward to you joining us at the next edition of the Grow Asia Digital Learning Series. Thank you all. Thank you, David. Thank you all of the panelists. It was a great session. I look forward to seeing you all at the next session. Thank you, and goodbye for wherever you are.